Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and this, well, you can probably guess, is the new MacBook Pro 16. I actually have two of these. Apple very kindly sent a review sample, which I set up early and have been having a bit of a play with. I've also got a couple of the MacBooks here, which I want to talk about. But this is the one I bought as well, because my editing team and I, so my brother Pete and my friend James, and also myself, hopefully will be switching to these as our main editing and work PCs. Definitely a bit of an investment, but hopefully it pays off. So let's get this unboxed. I'll show you around, talk you through what's new, do some comparisons, and give you my first impressions, and well, just have a bit of a chat about these new MacBooks. So let's do the best bit. Let's get this unboxed. So, where do we start? There is about a million things to talk about with this, but I guess the design, that's obviously the most obvious change up front, and actually if we bring in the old 16-inch version, straight away you'll be able to see quite a few differences. This is the space gray of the old model, this is this silver new one. We've got this black on black keyboard, which is very striking. I'm not sure if I love it straight away. It feels like someone's just squeezed in a Logitech keyboard or something into the center here. Elsewhere, we've got these much thinner bezels, as you can see, and also, well, the notch, love it or hate it, but we'll come back to that in a second. It is a bigger 16.2-inch versus 16-inch screen, so a little bit more screen real estate because of those thinner bezels, but in pretty much the same overall form factor. And of course, also going back to the keyboard, no more touch bar. I must admit, I did get used to using this, perhaps a bit of Stockholm syndrome or something, but I am going to miss it. But we are now back to this full height keyboard with these full-size function row keys. Touch ID at the top right, no Face ID, of course. And also I noticed there's no key for the keyboard backlight up here. And actually, I noticed if you put your hand in front of the FaceTime camera, it actually automatically dims it. So there must be a light sensor in here that adjusts that backlight, which is kind of nifty. We've also got improved speakers, and if we put these on the side, you'll see these ports. Look at these, we've got ports. Very un-Apple-like, but we've got an HDMI 2, not 2.1 sadly, but it will still do 4K 60 and HDR. Thunderbolt 4, SD card reader. We've got the new MagSafe 3 port alongside two more Thunderbolt 4s and a headphone jack. And you can see it is quite a bit chunkier than the old MacBook Pro 16, and we've got these little feet on the bottom so it stands off the desk just a little bit to give it more airflow. We still had that on the old one, but it's just a bit more obvious here. Let's talk about this screen, because I think after the new M1 Pro and M1 Max chips inside, this is the biggest update to the new MacBook Pros. So if I jump into the system preferences, you can see this is the Apple XDR display. We've got a P3 1600 nits, so that's the peak brightness when you're watching or looking at HDR content. Normally it tops out at 1000 nits. And you can also see we've got this ProMotion 120 Hz, although you can also specify it to one of these frame rates if you prefer. And to be honest, you notice it straight away, even just with the cursor on the home screen. But if you jump into a website like this, it just feels so much smoother. And this will dynamically adjust the refresh rate based on what you're doing. So if you're watching a movie, then it will go down to 24 or 30 frames per second. But that really is glorious. And even though generally on laptops we associate high refresh with gaming, not necessarily a strong point for MacBooks, in terms of just everyday productivity, use, how quick and fast things feel to use, it really is a big quality of life difference. You've got to try it for yourself. And of course also, it is mini LEDs. So if we jump into a video, and this is actually a clip from Gemini Man, but straight away you can see with that Dolby Vision logo, just how inky and deep those blacks are. I think this is maxed out brightness, there we go. And actually, unlike the iPads, I'm not seeing as much blooming around the screen, which is great to see. Although there will always be some because it's not an OLED display. First thing I noticed watching this wasn't how bright it was or colorful, but it's because the 16:10 aspect ratio of the screen means that that notch completely disappears. Even this with a bit of letterboxing, if you had a full screen 16:9 video, that notch still wouldn't get in the way because of the taller aspect. Going back to blooming just for a second, and this is a really good example, and you can see there's just a little bit of light bleed either side, but I don't think it's even as bad as I say as we get on the iPhone, not the iPhone, the iPad Pro 12.9. That is actually very, very impressive for a mini LED screen. So it's brighter, we've got that ProMotion refresh, we've got that mini LED panel, which obviously gives us much more contrast as well. So it is a huge screen upgrade, but let's get to the good bit. Let's talk about performance, because I've actually got the top spec model here, which costs like $3.5 grand, I think. It is the Apple M1 Max with 64 gigs of unified memory and also a whopping 4 terabytes of storage. I think it's like the one spec down from the top spec, which has 8 gigs. So how fast is it? Well, this is going to be an entire video by itself. I'll compare the Pro and the Max and also versus the older models, but I do want to just give you a couple of quick benchmarks. So let's jump into my Geekbench results, and we'll start with the processor. And if I bring in the old i9, this has also got 16 gigs of RAM. So this is the outgoing top spec MacBook Pro, and that is quite a big difference. 1000 versus 1700, 6400 versus 12,700. So almost twice as fast multi-core as the previous top spec i9 MacBook Pro, and also about 70% faster single core. But what about OpenCL? So this is 61,000 versus, drumroll please, 32,367. So that is, again, almost twice as fast in terms of the compute OpenCL test. But I also ran Tomb Raider. We've gone from an average 48 FPS at Full HD Plus high settings with the AMD Radeon Pro 5500M to 90 FPS with the M1 Max. How often do we see a doubling of graphics performance? It's pretty insane actually. So 48 versus 90. If you want to play Shadow of the Tomb Raider, you're going to want to get yourself a new M1 Max MacBook Pro 16 for like $3 grand. There must be a better way. But let me bring in the MacBook Pro 13. So the current one with M1 to see how much faster, which way around is it, the M1 Max is with 64 gigs of unified RAM versus just the basic M1 with 16 gigs. So 19,000 OpenCL versus 60,000. So 3 times more powerful with the top spec M1 Max versus the basic M1. But in terms of the CPU, we're actually getting the same single core score, although about a 50% higher multi-core score. So that's kind of interesting. One of the big upgrades for me, aside from the new M1 Pro and Max chips, is the fact they also have a dedicated media engine and also a dedicated ProRes encoder and decoder. But the media engine handles H.264, 265, and all that good stuff. So for me, as someone who shoots 4K 10-bit 422 H.264 content, which is a struggle even on my desktop PC with an RTX 3090. I still have to use proxies because the codec's just horrible. It struggles. So I'm really curious to see how this handles it and also how this does it as well. So this is my Pixel 6 Pro edit, which I'm sure Apple will appreciate me bringing up as I'm demonstrating these new Apple laptops. Instant on that one, couple of seconds there. That's crazy, look at that. So place your bets. Half an hour of 4K 10-bit footage. How long do you think each one will take? Let's find out. Encoding, we're at 1% already. 23 minutes estimated versus 43 minutes estimated. So this looks like it's going to be about twice as fast. And not only that, but already I can hear the fans whir up on the Intel i9. It's getting quite warm underneath. Let's try this one. A tiny bit. It's not cold, but it's nowhere near as warm. Also, both are running on battery here. So that is a pretty big win for the new MacBook. So let's put this old one away because there's a couple more things I want to show you on the new MacBook. And actually, if you are looking to use this as a real powerhouse workstation, then one unique feature exclusive to the 16-inch version, this is not on the 14, but we have this energy mode option. And by default, it's in automatic mode. You can also put it in low power to save battery, or high power. So that actually doesn't change the clock speeds or anything as far as I'm told, but it unlocks some of the restrictions on the fans. So you'll get that peak performance for longer. Now let's talk about charging, because with your MacBook Pro 16, you get one of these. It is a 140 watt fast charger. And you also get this. It's a MagSafe 3 connector. So on this charger, you've got USB-C one end, which you plug in like so. That is how you plug in a USB-C port cable thing, and MagSafe on the other. And it's quite a nice long cable as well. Also, obviously being MagSafe, it's in the name. If someone trips over your charger, it will just pull out, which is nice and easy, and something we used to enjoy with older MacBooks. Now, this is the only way to get the fastest 140 watt charging. You can use a regular USB-C cable with this, but it will top out at about 97 watts. Via USB-C. Now on the 14-inch version of the new MacBook Pro, you get a 67 watt charger by default, but you can pay an extra 20 quid or $20 for a faster 97 watt charger to get fast charging. Bit complicated, but we do now have fast charge options, although the only way of fast charging the 16 is via MagSafe, or else it'll just be slower if you use USB-C. And then we also have this little guy, the new 1080p FaceTime camera. Despite the notch, no center stage or Face ID sadly, but it is an improvement in the quality. It does still look quite soft, it's not that sharp, I'm noticing, even though the lighting in here is pretty good actually, but the colors look accurate, natural, and there's not a lot of noise. So in terms of laptop webcams, it's probably one of the best, outside of maybe a Microsoft Surface. So there is an awful lot going on here. The MiniLED ProMotion screen, the notch with the improved FaceTime camera, the keyboard without the touch bar. We've got the better speakers and also the extra ports, although really they've only added two, the SD and the HDMI. A USB-A would have been nice perhaps, given how chunky this is now, but certainly it's an improvement. Also, of course, the M1 Pro and Max chips. So this is very much a first impressions. It's going to take me a while to fully get to grips with this, do all my tests and benchmarks and comparisons, but I'm very much looking forward to it because I don't think there's been a laptop this exciting for quite a few years actually. It's not just like another Dell XPS 15 or another MacBook Pro with a new Intel chip that's 10% faster. This is a proper revolutionary update. But what do you reckon? Are you tempted to buy yourself one of these? Or do you think it's a little bit too expensive and overhyped? Let me know what you make of the new MacBooks in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, then a little like and subscribe would be lovely. And I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.